We got a great period for you, lots of stuff going on, and the first thing is a student presenter. Eddie, give him a round of applause. Eddie, come on up.
T.S. Eliot calls them hollow men, a term used to describe those without imagination or purpose. For one reason or another, you lose your urge to strive and hope and imagine. You begin to go with the flow, saying what other people say and doing what other people do, losing your sense of self. And it's even worse now because instead of other people, we're following AI and the internet online. Being hollow means you dig your head in the sand, telling yourself you're correct without stopping to reflect on what is right and wrong. What hollow people lack isn't up here. They lack dreams. Well, obviously they wouldn't be a Wildcat, but I didn't always know about the importance of dreaming. During the height of the pandemic, I did what all of the other 12-year-old kids are doing. I sat in front of a screen on social media. Now, my type of social media wasn't the fashionable type back then. No, I was goofing off on chess forums. And it was there that I met someone that I will remember to this day. I don't recall the exact circumstances of how we met, but this user and I would chat every day. I told him about my life, and my concerns about the future, and he told me about his, how he was in his 20s, still living with his parents and not knowing what to do. My attempts at consolation were a bit lacking. I mean, what sort of life advice could you possibly get from a 6th grader? We would talk through our problems together, something we lacked alone in our homes. As we talked more, he started to call me Little Man. I didn't always understand dreams, but it was here where the power of dreams was shown to me. 1 week after our first contact, I went to check my computer. He was gone, leaving one last message. Little man, I have closed my account. I don't want you to think that I did anything bad. Don't feel anxious. You are lucky you have so much time. I'm going to fix my life now. Thank you for helping me. I stared at my screen and I couldn't look away. Here was a man who was swamped with his own problems, but still dared to console and spark hope for someone else. Here was a man who had sunken into desperation, but still dared to battle his way into the future. Here was a man who dreamed. If you went back in time and asked me, what do you dream of? I would have replied, I dream to have a dream. Although dreams provide a purpose, they are sly things. They can appear as mirages, fading suddenly when you get too close. Dreams can also pop out of nowhere, like Dr. K in the hallways. And when you obtain a dream, never let it go, for it may never return. Ladies and gentlemen, never stop dreaming. A dream is a legacy, proof of humanity. Whether escaping hollowness or recovering from failure, to feel the depths of despair and yet triumph over it in the ways possible to oneself is surely a beautiful and human grace. Thank you.
Dreams. Yeah, that's what Writers Expo is all about. Okay, so thank you, Eddie. Can we give him another round of applause? It does take a lot to get up here and share your work with your peers and with your teachers, and we appreciate every student who does. If you're even thinking you might want to do this next year, yes, do it, for sure. You've got a year to write something. You may have already written something in English class. We would love to have you up here. We would love to give you the mic. Think about it. Come talk to me or your English teacher if you are. All right, next up. Oh, there's an announcement I forgot to give, but I want to make sure we get it in quickly. So everyone who's coming up on stage today is here out of the goodness of their own heart. No one's getting paid to be here, and we appreciate that very much. And like right now, I'm looking around and I'm seeing a lot of eyes locked in, listening. Keep that up, okay? The more you can do to show the people who are guests today that you're here, the more they feel confident and excited to be here, and it just makes it better for everyone. So yeah, keep the phones away, no whispering, no chatting, all that stuff, and this is gonna be great. Next up, we have what we call impromptu poetry. Rishi, come on up. So Rishi has volunteered to write a poem, and she's gonna do this backstage while our main guest and I are talking and answering your questions, and then in like the last 5 minutes of the period, she's gonna come out and read the poem that she has written. And the challenge is that she has to use the following 10 words. And I asked her fellow Drops of Ink members to go ahead and send me some words. The cruelest ones I did not accept. They really were asking for supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, and I was like, I think we can do better. And no, yeah, there were some mean ones, but yeah, we made it as nice as we could. So here are your 10 words. And you can change the form of the word if you want, but you have to use all 10, and then any other words you want for the poem. Rishi has a document she's going to type the poem on, and we're going to be able to take a look at the poem, like I said, last 5 minutes of the period, okay? Give her some encouragement. All right, off you go. Good luck. All right, next up we have our featured guest. Let me introduce her. She writes novels, essays, and screenplays on topics as wide-ranging as philosophy and creativity, gender metaphysics, second and third wave feminism, cults, grifters, and the American dream. She has published 2 novels and a short story collection. One novel, Confidence, was named a New York Times editor's pick, and the other novel, The Come Down, was, the year it was published, one of the Washington Post's 50 notable works of fiction. The Come Down was also recently acquired for TV development by Sony Trident. Her collection of short stories, Bugsy, was longlisted for the 2024 Story Prize, and in 2008 she graduated from LHS. Now she lives in Minneapolis with her wife and many animals. Please welcome Raf Frumkin.
Mr. Tooley, should I bring this with me?
We've got 2 over here.
Oh, perfect.
You're good. Thanks for checking. Still have batteries. Yep, we do. Okay.
Thank you, by the way, for having me and for that wonderful introduction.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming and doing this and doing it for free. This is the first time I've been able to say that a former student of mine is now a guest at Writers Expo. I am so super proud. When you were up here with the Drops of Ink students before, like, you're getting the welling of the eyes and the emotions going. It's just super cool. So first, let me ask, before we get to the passage, how does it feel to be back?
You know, it feels, I was actually telling Mrs. LeMaistry this, it almost feels like a new place because you kind of, when you're in high school, when you're in adolescence, right, you're like doing your stuff and you're going to school and you're like, oh, I have so much homework, and like, oh my God, like my friends are being annoying today. But, give it, God, however many years, right, like 15, 18, come back, you're like, oh, what a nice little atrium, oh, the snow looks beautiful, on the front lawn. And so I think I'm kind of seeing it through, the school through like a new perspective, and I'm like, oh, it's lovely. So I'll say that. It's lovely to be back.
That's awesome. Actually, before we get to that even more, comment on this?
Oh man. Oh, well, that's me. Wow, Sarah Wisniewski.
Yeah,
School
that brought
routine
back
destroying our
memories.
sense of attention. Hold on. Too much testing equals not enough reading. That's still true. YouTube radicals, a reactive generation.
There was another one of your headlines. I had no clue what it was talking about, so I didn't copy it. But yeah, so Raf was on the Drops of Ink staff when she was here. So I thought I would see her reaction to this. I thought that might be kind of fun.
Wait, so do you remember? I remember Sarah, of course. She's fantastic. I just remember none of this. I come across a little bit as as like a cantankerous NYT, like a Pauline Kael, to like, oh, our celebrity obsession. Come on, what's wrong with America? I come across as like a bit of a cranky teenager here. But do you remember that like Iraq War feature we did?
Yeah, so she was talking about this last period. She came to the staff and was like, I want to do the history of the Iraq War. And we didn't do as much, I think it's safe to say, serious stuff 15, 20 years ago, like Drops of Ink is doing now. So yeah, paired with some of the other stuff we had, I didn't even think about like what a strange dichotomy that was, but I do remember that article. Yeah.
We were so far from being done with the Iraq War too. There would be many years to go, and it's like, yeah, it was just like this like issue of DOI that was like, hey, you know, what's going on at school, and like, what did the swim team do? And then the back cover, it's like, this is what America's been doing in Fallujah. Like, and I just, you were such a great sport. And then like the other writers were awesome, and it was really fun. It was just like it was an interesting distinction to have that on the back.
Well, when you hire someone to be a journalism advisor who has no journalism background or experience, you just have to be a good sport because you don't have a choice. All right, go ahead and read, A Passage from Confidence. Let's hear that. So this is the latest novel, correct?
Yeah, this is the latest novel, and this is the one about everyone who's here now is not here last period, right? We have a whole new group.
Any repeats?
Any repeats? No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Cool. So this is a novel about con artistry and scamming. And so I'll ask all of you, does anyone know what a con artist, confidence artist, yeah? What's a con artist?
Like someone who scams people, like someone who pretends to be like a nice guy, but in reality they have malicious intentions.
Exactly. Yeah, so thank you. This gentleman up front said, you know, a con artist is someone who pretends to be a nice person, pretends to be a nice guy, but is lying, is deceiving, and actually has very malicious intentions. Oh, it's not up here, but the confidence, this book is basically, it arose from the thought experiment of, okay, what if it was like two con artists and they were in love? You know, or at least one was in lust with the other, sort of an object of fixation. And so that's where confidence came from. Now, I hope you all have gotten the chance to read The Great Gatsby in American Lit. If you haven't yet, nice. If you haven't yet, okay, this book, the protagonist of this book is kind of like Nick Carraway, who's the narrator of The Great Gatsby. He's looking at Jay Gatsby, he's saying, what an amazing guy. This guy's so cool, he's so interesting. Except Jay Gatsby is not telling the whole truth, okay? So that's kind of the section we're going to get, is our narrator, Ezra, he's like, ooh, Orson, I love him. He's such a cool guy, such an interesting guy. He's about to deceive a room full of people. But Orson, you know, his mind is elsewhere. He's thinking about some other stuff. He's thinking about Orson, let's put it that way. Okay, so, this is chapter 5. We don't want to read from chapter 5. It's too far in. All right, so here we are. We're in the Boyd Hotel, and Orson Ortman is giving a Secrets to Success seminar. He's talking to a bunch of very wealthy people whom he's kind of grifted into, come to my seminar. He's going to tell them the secrets to his success. And Ezra, his sidekick, his Nick Carraway, is watching him. All right. Orson was standing behind a podium at the front of the room, shuffling a stack of index cards on which I'd scrupulously written nearly every word he planned to say. I winked at him. He smiled tentatively and winked back. Then he turned to survey the room. He was thinking about them now, not about me. Ladies, Orson said, and the murmuring in the room dropped a note before stopping altogether. Thank you for coming today. And a special thank you to Carol Argyros for organizing this event. My pleasure, Carol called, and swiveled to beam at the other women in the room. The genuine article, she crowed. Thank you, Carol. Orson knit his brows, thinking, I've had a difficult life, ladies, which makes me all the luckier for being able to stand in front of you today. You could say I've lived many lives. I've been a son, a brother, a student, a mentor. Here he gestured to me, and I bowed my head reverentially. By the grace of a higher power, I've had the privilege of being able to lift people out of difficult circumstances and set them on the right path. I've loved and I've lost, and I've done it all in the span of a couple decades. My friend Ezra, you could argue he's had it much more difficult than I have. I nodded. I could feel every set of eyes in the room on me. Ezra, tell me, what was the most difficult moment in your life? I sold drugs to a boy younger than me, I said, and he later got very sick. Gasps went up from the audience. Ezra, what helped you back? You did, Orson. Apparently, he'd found me in a homeless shelter when he'd first moved to the city from Nebraska. I'd reminded him of his younger brother with cerebral palsy, he'd said, so he decided to mentor me. Helped me out of delinquency. We'd gone to college, and then we'd come back to take jobs at the Boyd. I worked hard, ladies, and I prayed hard, and Ezra and I made it out of danger's way. A round of applause, the first of many. I saw Orson's smile brighten, his shoulders untense. He spoke for nearly an hour, and I watched the women around me pull their handkerchiefs from their Louis Vuitton purses and dab at the corner of their eyes or knit their hands into impassioned fists in their laps. Then I watched Orson, his eyes bright and his limbs fluid, pacing back and forth at the front of the conference room, captivating even Pilar and Tori, who had cracked open bottles of Fiji water for themselves. It seemed as if he were the only source of light in the room, as if we'd all be left in darkness where he had stopped speaking. Ladies, he said, I've been working on a way to share my happiness with you. I know we're just in a conference room in a hotel, but I think this could still be a very spiritual place. He was going off book. I tried to make eye contact with him, but he was turned away from me. Can I have a volunteer? He asked, pulling an empty chair from the front row. The room exploded with chatter, the women looking among themselves for someone willing to volunteer. Carol moved to the edge of her seat. I could tell that she, like me, had not been expecting this. When no one emerged after 30 seconds, she stood up. I'd be happy to volunteer, Orson, she said to good-humored applause from her friends. Just promise not to send me into some sort of state. Laughter. Orson joined in. He gave her his hand as though he were helping her out of a horse-drawn carriage, and she joined him at the front of the room. You all know and love Carol, don't you? A chorus of yeses. And you know that Carol, despite seeming superhuman with all the love and caring she does for us and Dimitri, is only human. Another chorus. Carol sat down. Orson stood behind her. I'm going to place my fingers at your temple, Carol, and I want you to just focus on my fingers. Nothing else. The room was completely silent. I wondered, half in panic and half in curiosity, what on earth he was doing. Carol, this is a process called synthesis. It's meant to cleanse you of all the things in your body and mind that trouble you. It will take these things out and put them between my hands, as though through the power of a metaphysical prayer. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
I'm so glad you chose that passage, because I had forgotten about that scene, and I just remember when I was reading it that, and I don't laugh out loud very often in fiction, but I remember like chuckling because on the one hand you're seeing the satire and you know that this is a mimicry of so much stuff, and I felt like I know so many people like Carol. The characters are just coming alive. So first question for you, some of my students will potentially be writing a short story that they have to turn in at some point. How do you capture characters? How do you write characters? How do you get them to pop off the page and come to life? Is there any trick?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, actually. And I'll use an example from this book. So when I really want to kind of like, as you say, like kind of like make a character pop on the page, right? I have to accept the fact, not only that there's a part of myself in every character I write, it's just realistic, right? We can't say that if you're authoring a short story, there's not a part of you, right, in every single individual consciousness that shows up in that story. But B, I have to be realistic about the fact that if I really want a character to sort of grab the reader's attention, that character has to come from a place of deep, deep feeling, for lack of a better term, in me. So I'll use an example, Carol. Now, I'll be real. I am Carol. That's the embarrassing part about confidence. It's a book about people being deceived, and I'm writing from the experience of being easy to deceive. So I had to admit to the fact, right, that there's a certain gullibility that's happened for me in my life. My friend he wrote a book just like this as well. It's called Ill Will. It's so good. But the main character really resembles him, and the main character gets fleeced completely. And there's a vulnerability of that, right? Like, oh man, I don't want to tell everyone that I can be gullible sometimes, and that's embarrassing. However, you also kind of see the flip side of it, right? Like, if you're writing from a place of vulnerability, there's the hard part, there's the embarrassing part, there's also the positive aspects of it. So yes, Carol's easily deceived. However, Carol's optimism and wanting to trust and wanting to believe in this really sort of kind of almost magical procedure, right? That's actually a positive characteristic of Carol. People say all the time when they leave cults, people leave the Scientology cult, all these really harmful cults. I didn't think I was joining a cult, right? I just wanted to be part of a movement, a community, people doing cool stuff. Now, unfortunately, you'll get the scam artist or your deceiver at the center of things, and that person's just kind of vacuuming up all that good energy. But it doesn't mean that the energy is any less good.
So it kind of reminds me of something I saw you, and I don't remember if it was something you said or wrote, and I don't even remember the exact words. I might be taking this and skewing it quite a bit. But I thought it was really interesting that you were talking about how as a reader, even with the bad guy in the book, if you feel like there's no way that you can have any sort of empathy or compassion for that person, it turns you off, that is a crucial aspect for you as a reader. I imagine then as a writer, it's all the more important. And is that difficult, especially when you're dealing with someone like Orson, who's just...
Totally. I mean, and I think that's really well put. It's, for what you just said, Mr. Tully, the idea of even the antagonist, right? Think of a Disney villain. Think of Ursula from The Little Mermaid. This is more my era. I'm still stuck on the nostalgia.
That was the musical this year, so...
Oh, there's a musical?
Good
Oh my
time,
God,
yeah.
it's so fresh in your minds. There's, even though Ursula's oh, she's this evil witch, and she's taking Ariel's voice, and she's making this sort of, Mephistophelian situation where this poor woman is being deceived, right? But Ursula's compelling. Ursula's interesting. Why are there so many memes about Ursula? Why do people still continue to think about these characters who we're supposed to say, they're the villain? It's because, going back to that idea of the vulnerability, in writing a character, it's because the evil characters, quote unquote, are still human. That is the fact of the matter. When I'm confronted with a character who's just not complex, who's just only vile, right? I'm it does feel like a dead end. It feels like a brick wall. It feels difficult to continue reading because I'm just kind of how's this character going to develop? What is dynamic about this character? I think that if we acknowledge that the stuff that we want to sweep under the rug, right? Oh, I feel guilty, right? Sorry, I feel embarrassed about being gullible. Or, I don't want to acknowledge the fact that people fall for tricks like those that Orson perpetuates in this book all the time. If we sweep that under the rug and we make things simple and ultra moralistic, that's where we get that overly simple storytelling that doesn't grab you, right? So I think to your point, it's accepting that these characters, even if they're doing bad stuff, they're still complex, just like the good characters.
Okay, so now a little bit of a craft question, because so many times I think as lit teachers, we're talking about The Great Gatsby, we're talking about whatever it is, and you're trying to help your students see these things that you're pretty confident are intentional choices by the author, but you never really know, right? Intention with the names and confidence. How much are you willing to tell us? I don't want, magicians never give away their tricks, but are you willing to explain at all anything in regards to why you named certain characters the way you did?
Definitely. Well, Orson, can you guess why I named Orson? Because you're a bit of a film nerd.
Well, yeah, Orson Welles came to mind, right?
That's exactly why. Yeah. If there's this filmmaker a long time ago, Orson Welles, who made a movie called Citizen Kane, and when he was very young, and this is like black and white film. So really, we're the 20th century here, pre-war 20th century. He made this film called Citizen Kane. He was in his 20s, right? And he just exploded onto the scene. And the thing, like, his films are incredible. If anyone's interested in classic Hollywood, I recommend them. The thing about Orson Welles is the dude was really, really quite full of himself. And he had the talent to back it up, but he had a big ego. And so I was like, oh my God, well, Orson Orton will be Orson Welles. Ezra was not that character's name originally. That character was originally named Raphael with a PH. And that's kind of, as I was writing this book, I was like, oh man, I think I want to take on a new name, which is a story for a whole nother 25 minutes. But I want to take on a new name, and I think I wanted to be Raphael, so we had to change that name. So now I forget why I chose Ezra, but it's a weird backstory. I sometimes still think of that character as Raph, but then I'm like, no, I'm Raph.
That's cool. Why do you continue to write? What have you gotten away from writing? Who's the gentleman who was the School of Rock guy? Oh, Mr.
Zabel. He said something fantastic that I completely agree with. So Mr. Zabel, he was here a couple periods ago. He said, he was like, I want to make an impassioned plea for writing as more than a workaday skill, right? Writing isn't just like, I wrote, an amazing college application and now I've gotten into Yale. Or like, I wrote a really persuasive essay in Mr. Truly's class and now I got an A, right? Yeah, those are valuable forms of writing, right? But Mr. Zabel made a case for writing as a way of self-understanding, as a way of working out what's going on in your head and in your life on the page. And I was like, whew, preach, because he even talked about how you could approach a diary, a journal, right, with problems as mundane as, oh, I'm feeling stressed at work. Or you can approach a journal with like metaphysical questions, right? Like, why are we here? That's the beauty of writing. It's just so endlessly malleable. It's like it's a big container that you can store all of your thoughts, all of your becoming in. And so the reason I keep on writing, I think, is the reason Mr. Zabel keeps his journal, is I can't not, like, you've got to, wild stuff happens in a person's life, and sometimes you gotta write to understand it. I'm sure other folks in here maybe paint to understand it, right? Take photographs. People have elaborate D&D campaigns, and in those D&D campaigns, maybe they play a half-orc who's like going through some of the same stuff they're going through, just in a different world or dimension. Again, writing any creative activity, right, helps you figure out what's going on in your life when you're not doing that activity. So it's indispensable. It is so valuable. And the short answer is, I couldn't not. Like, I keep writing because there's like not an alternative. A life for me without writing is like, whoop, what? It's confusing.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, so I know that, and I always get confused, we've been back and forth about this and I still can't get it straight. I know something has been picked up by a production company and you've been commissioned to actually do some screenwriting, which is a totally different format. Was there any fear regarding that? Like, how have you been able to kind of deal with that new endeavor?
It's, maybe there would have been room for fear, except it has happened. I've been switched jobs. So I was like, well, I could be all nervous about this, but that would make me not write this as quickly, and I would like to get paid. So it actually became kind of like a practical thing of like, I was able to sort of jump over some hurdles to, mental hurdles to get there. But, it's like really, really quite different. Writing this from writing this you just like sit down and, don't get me wrong, it's like it's pretty laborious to get from rough draft to finished book. But you sit down, you write the book, it is a sort of a solo practice. With screenwriting, you're writing with a partner. Many people screenwrite alone. I screenwrite with a partner. She's amazing. She's such a great sort of sounding board. But what we basically did is we would sort of hammer out the beats of the screenplay in a simulated writer's room. So y'all know how TV gets written? Does anyone know how TV gets written or what a writer's room is? Have you heard of that? This is good to know if you like to watch TV. So basically, a group of people meets in a room, just like it sounds, and talks ad nauseum for 8 hours about the plot of a single episode of TV. And then 2 people from that group go and write it. And then those 2 bring it back to that big group, which includes something called the showrunner. That person's in charge of the whole show and making it happen. And they're like, hey, here's what we wrote based on our 8 hours of conversation. And the people are like, oh, cool. And then they give you notes and stuff. So it's really collaborative. It's really fun. It's immensely exhausting if you're not super extroverted. And the deadlines are really tight. But fun fact, a friend of mine who writes comedy told me this. You can work 9 to 5 for a full year, like a normal work year, meeting in this writer's room style, and that produces 3 years of TV. 3 seasons of TV from 52 weeks. You get time off, but 52 weeks of that kind of collaborative work. It's wild.
That is wild. Okay, so we're gonna bring Rishi out in about 5 or 6 minutes, and Mr. Schmidt, is it okay if I task you in 5 or 6 minutes with grabbing Rishi? Perfect. Okay, we wanna make sure we have time for audience questions. AV booth, I don't know if you can maybe raise the lights just a little bit over the audience. Maybe my eyes are just not doing so well in my older age, but any questions from the audience? If you do have a question, raise your hand, we'll call on you, and then you're gonna have to really project your voice.
Question in the
back,
back.
yeah.
Way in the back.
Yeah, so just last hour, we heard from the DOI staff how important it is to kind of marry the literature to the visual display of DOI. So I'm just curious, for your writings up there on the screen, when you see the final product, don't judge a book by its cover, the old adage, and yet so much of that first pickup is the cover. Is that something you have input on? Is that something where you've ever been pleasantly surprised with, or maybe not so pleasantly surprised with what was brought to you? And the titles, is that where you begin and then you write, or do you write and then the title's the very last thing? So just kind of curious.
That's a great question. I've gotten really lucky here. Oftentimes, folks will, be presented with a title. Usually, publishing houses have an in-house cover designer, and that designer will be like, "Hey, here's the title," or sorry, here's the cover, is what I mean. Here's the mock-up, and usually it's like, "Ooh, I'm going to give you some feedback." But these are all first drafts, and they just knocked it out of the park. Phenomenally good covers. The titles were my own, though. I'm a big fan of titles, and I agree with you. It's so important to have an eye-catching cover, and to also have a cover that works with the title. But yeah, I think I really got lucky with these.
What happened with the paperback? Was that?
Oh yeah, paperback. Yeah, what about the paperback? Mm-hmm. The paperback has a different cover from the hardcover. And yes, this is also the first draft. It's hard to see, but the paperback is, it's kind of like these dudes in sort of 60s Mad Men kind of suits with like money flying around them. And it's kind of cool when the paperback edition of a book comes out and the cover changes. If you're like a collector of books like me, you could be like, ooh, they're same book, different cover, and that's also really fun.
Awesome. Any other questions from the audience? Raise your hand high just so we can see it. Yeah, over here.
When you write and you establish a setting, how much do you base it off of your real world experiences in certain locations?
Oh yeah, that's a really excellent point. It's like, or question rather, it's like, your question's a little bit about world building, right? Yeah. So, you know, I'll actually kind of default to point of view here, right? So if I am writing about, let's use LHS for example, right? That is a setting that everyone here is familiar with. So if I'm writing about LHS, and I'm writing about LHS circa 2004, right? The way I'm gonna build that world out is I'm going to rely really intensely on the point of view that's observing that world, on the camera lens, okay? So, you know, I might notice, if we were to like transport us all back to the early aughts, I might notice something very different from you, right? Like I might notice like, oh, this banner's over here. You might notice that door over there. And that is sort of like that decision, that noticing, right? That unconscious decision is predicated upon who you are and who I am, right? How we move through the world. And so to kind of like, you know, if we're talking about like speculative settings or like, you know, other settings that don't exist in real life, I would still really default to the POV of that character. It's what the character is seeing that matters the most about that world.
Okay, we probably have time for just one question while we get Rishi out. Rishi, if you can hear me, feel free to come on out. But yeah, go ahead, Sophia.
What do you do when you have writer's block? How do you get inspiration?
Another great question. So I actually just gave someone a little bit of advice about this. I would really, really, really encourage writing outside the story you're working on, but like still related to it. So a student just a few minutes ago was like, hey, you know, I'm working on a story about a group of kids who are investigating these, their friends are missing, right? The point of view is the kids doing the investigation, not the missing kids. If you're having writer's block and you don't quite know how to finish that story, write from the point of view of the missing kids as an exercise. You don't have to put it in. You don't even have to put it into the story. But it loosens up your brain because the brain can get like kind of clench and harden and be like, I gotta finish this, I gotta make it good. Relax for a second, okay? And kind of step outside the story, explore it from a new perspective, that'll help.
Awesome. Rishi, are we ready? Yes. All right. Let's see. All right, so AV Booth, if you could click on the link that has Rishi's poem so we can all see it while she reads it. Rishi, take it away.
So I hope this is coherent because at some point I forgot what this is for and I started rambling. But the title of my piece is for RT 6A. And to explain the title, this is me writing back to my 6th grade self. And yeah, ignore the comment. That's me figuring out how to pronounce Worcestershire. Yeah, there we go. I think I would call myself the best at running, not necessarily the kind that involves a cascade of footsteps, retracing your own strides in a wild chase as your mouth tastes like stale Worcestershire and sweat feels like drops of ice on your skin because every step I take makes my knees feel like rust and my eyes are shattered and sting like taunts hurled and insults penned in a fraction of a second and in oceans of minutes at once because time is a social construct. But no, I say I'm good at running because I will keep running, like Sisyphus rolling his rock until it erodes, to familiar dust in his palms, because my mind is a desert that I travel in, like an intellectual nomad, only to run up against the inside of my skull, because I can only run so much, neurons stretched and torn like heartstrings, before I gasp for breath and the sand in my thoughts and Sisyphus's palms fill my lungs and settle in my stomach, scratchy like heavy, ugly truths. Our grandmother used to braid our hair, dousing it in coconut oil and brushing it until the curls collapsed within themselves and surrendered to the two braids they became because it was like you, unruly, uncontained, and too hard for even you to handle. I think of how Bengaluru became Bangalore, and Puducherry became Pondicherry, and Rishika became Rishi, all seemingly of their own accord, how sounds and rolling R's were snipped away like bits and pieces of my memory, of the swooping hills and valleys of written Telugu, like the pit stops and flowing vowels of spoken word that will live forever on the tip of my tongue, I'm sure, disintegrating into congressional caucus-like gobbledygook, because there's only so far you can run. I think of all your dreams of who we will be one day, aspirations, castles in the sky. I think of the mitochondrial DNA in all our cells, the only thing that belongs to just my mother and I, and wonder if with it I'll get her oceans of patience, her inexplicable ability to make everything better, the energy she seems to summon out of nowhere, and if my shoulders are broad enough to carry it. And sometimes I really think about if God is real, and if one day I will come back as a redwood or a moth through some strange ancient magic. You ask me if we still believe in God, and then I stop, because I don't know, and I still don't know if we'll ever publish that book, and I don't know where we'll be next year. I don't know, and then I ask myself, does it really matter? I don't know how our story ends, but I write it as I speak. And if you must be Sisyphus, I'll be the hill that bears your weight. And if you must be Icarus, I'll be the waves that cradle you when you fall. And if you must be Orpheus, I'll forgive you when you turn around. Because I know that today, right now, I can turn around and walk away with your hand in mine. Because we're only so young. There's still so much ahead of us. And we run away from all our problems, because even after all these years, running is still all I'm good at.
Rishi, that's phenomenal. And as a first draft, I mean, I'd be happy if that was my final product. What was the most difficult part of this? Or which word gave you the most trouble?
The W word.
I mean, nicely done with it. It worked really well, I thought. Now, did you find yourself, you had time to revise, or was it just kind of a little bit more stream of conscious?
I mean, I don't know. My writing style is weird because I just kind of like regurgitate it. I don't really think about revising it. I just put it out there and it's done.
Can I have a
Yes,
question?
please.
Can I ask you?
Yeah.
Rishi, do you find that like formal constraints, like if you have a prompt, you have a tight deadline, does it actually kind of like almost help sometimes?
Weird because I only seem to function under deadlines.
Yeah.
I kind of, yeah. I would say that did help.
Right on. This is amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.